GT Holidays, South India's #1 travel brand, presents Galata Plus at the Berlin Film Festival 2024.
GT Holidays, South India's #1 travel brand.
Hello, Robin.
Hello.
Congratulations on your film. I'm very curious about one thing before we begin talking about the film. Why the lowercase titles?
Well, something very much of a feeling. I think the film is very much about feeling, and we wanted to give it something more of the. It's a very fragile and delicate story, and it needs a lot of care. And somehow, when we would give it lowercase, we feel people would maybe treat it like I don't know, like as a small precious thing.
Right, and you have another film also which had a lowercase
That's true.
title. Yeah.
Yeah, something similar, something similar. Also, it's something that's uncommon, like I don't know, like a title with capital K's. It's something more of the how titles normally circulate, and we wanted to give it something more from the bottom up.
Yeah.
Because what is very important in both of these films is it's always like very much based on the voices of those people that are usually invisibilized. And we want to give that in a way, actually a space in the film.
Right. Now, when did you first hear the story of Mauda?
Thank you for that question. I read it in a newspaper, as I think most people did in Belgium. And the first version that I read in the newspaper was that of a ricochet, that a policeman had shot in the direction of a van full of people that were trying to cross the border to the English, crossing the English Channel, and that a ricochet happened and a 2-year-old child died. That was how I heard it, and then I also noticed that there were different versions coming in the newspaper, and as also in the film explained, in this story of this killing of this 2-year-old child, there were many different versions. In fact, the first version that the police told was a version where they said that the parents themselves had thrown their own child on the highway as a way to stop the police cars that were chasing them. So this kind of very large sense of dehumanization that was unfolding there from the side of the police, the prosecutor, and the authorities was something that a lot of people responded to in terms of they wanted to bring out the story, activists, lawyers, and so on. And myself then later decided to pick up the story in 21 when the trial was happening, when again it seemed that justice could not happen for the parents. And I, at that moment also, my daughter was 2 years old, so definitely there was that identification.
Like you said, this is a story of what you just explained, the death of a 2-year-old, but tragic. Like, is it an accident? What happened really? This is such a dramatic core. What is the difference between using a documentary form to tell the story and a fiction form to tell the story?
Yeah, very good question. For me, it all started with the question in a way like, so in this story, justice within the normal legal confines couldn't happen.
Right.
And as very often cases when we have police violence and that have a racial component. And then, so it was very important to talk with all the people that were doing the solidarity work for it and this activism, and sort of acknowledging that there are no frameworks to talk about this. So I really felt like the film should start from their voices. So the direct interviews that I had with everyone involved are actually the voices that we hear directly in the film.
Right.
That's the documentary element, and at the same time, I did introduce a fiction element, which is in the film, we see an assembly where people are coming together and listening to the reconstruction of the story. And actually that whole scene it's a mise en scène. It's totally created to actually make that the voices that we pre-recorded could actually find a cinematic body for it. And then that is brought into relation to images of the forensic site, what we call, where the police chase happened, where the killing happened. And there was very important that to actually create what I call presence and beauty in that landscape, because I didn't want it to be a place of trauma. I also wanted to be a place where we can already imagine another future in that same very place, and actually as something that can also hold the assembly.
Right. Now, there was a time, I'm going back as far as maybe Nanook of the North, when the documentary form was, people had a very fixed idea
Yeah.
of what a documentary is. And over the years, over the decades, so much has changed about how people treat documentaries.
Yeah.
What has been your experience with this?
Well, for me, my choices really come from sort of understanding that in documentary form, as we know it predominantly, there's a tendency to objectify the people, and then this is something that is very, or to, even just to give illustration to the facts that have been traumatic, I would feel like that's the wrong choice, because then we reproduce also somehow the violence. And so it's been a very delicate search together with all the people involved and that give voice to the film to actually not do that. So I have no better explanation at the moment than that there was a choice to give presence and not representation of it. And the presence that we feel is, in a way, it's the gift, the people that speak up, despite all these events. We have to really consider it as a gift, and it's almost like an act of love, to be able to reconstruct this. And also, the film reads as a tribunal, but I also think it's as much creating a space for grief. And I think this is something that we don't do, that there is not enough space for. So I want to bring the spectator of this film really together with these people through this process of grief and also, of course, of tribunal for what the authorities are not doing.
Right. Now, these films are so necessary today because they kind of, bring to the front a lot of facts that are happening in other countries, a lot of things that are happening in other countries that some parts of the world may not. For example, till I saw this film, I had no idea about this particular case, though, the kind of a thing. But at the same time, you also hear of people becoming desensitized by shocking incidents because so many of them, and it becomes yet another police killing, yet another hostage something, yet another something. I just want to know your thoughts on this between the necessity to tell the stories and also perhaps the acknowledgement that maybe a lot of these stories have been told and people have become maybe a little numb.
No, I think we live in very particular times because we have access through our screens in our hands to many actually very violent images. There's so many to say today. So yes, we can definitely have this. So how do we process this? And it's how to stay with the trouble of that. So I do think you can say it's a responsibility of filmmakers and of other artists and everyone actually that is involved in media and so on, to sort of indeed how can we create the time and the space to sit with these cases. And for me, this case in a way stands also directly for another unacknowledged fact, is that, let's say, in the last 20 years about 400 people died trying to cross the English Channel. This is a number that not Belgium nor the UK nor France is really accounting. And so it stands for, and then there's of course the institutional police violence that also happens in Belgium. And this is something that that is just very important to take time and space for, and to sit with it and to think about what institutional violence can create and how we as ordinary citizens can actually rehearse together ways of dealing with this. And this must be collective, and it must be through listening. And that's basically what this film is trying to give you as a message.
Right. Now, about your own technique while approaching this documentary form. Now, when a camera is placed in front of somebody, they're not being themselves, in the sense that they know that they are going to be a version of themselves. How do you strip down that awareness and bring them to as close to their natural self as possible?
Good question. I don't know, I think what is very important to know is that in the film we worked with a system that the people that we hear in the film are not the people that we see speaking.
Yeah.
So everyone was already like playing along, but it didn't require really like acting skills, or I mean something that we would have to rehearse on a long time. So it was also just about bringing people in the view of the camera in their most, you know, beautiful and yeah, like natural way. And that was definitely a very important element to it. And then, of course, there's also, in the film, we see people that are singing, chanting, lamenting. This was an ongoing, long process during the making of the film, something that we would have rehearsed already from the very early on, and then just as kind of like reenacted for the camera at a later stage. Also, the people that we hear sing, they're not professional singers, they're actually one of the people, also people that we interviewed in a very early stage. So we kind of invited them. For me, this film is as much about like the politics of how it's done, right? To sort of give acknowledge to the voice means also to give acknowledge to the creative, you know, input of everyone, and to kind of like bring that in the process as much as possible for everyone. So there's as much as people that are standing before the camera, but there's as much of people that have been behind the camera thinking together on how to do this.
Right, that was beautifully explained. Thank you.
Yeah.
Finally, you know, there is this question that you know, everything is political. People say that everything is political, and yet not everybody is considered a political filmmaker. How would you define a political filmmaker?
Yeah, indeed, it's a very large discussion. You know, I mean, how to think about this. I think for me it's more about sort of it's very much about acknowledgement of those voices that are invisibilized, marginalized. But we also have to understand when we want to create a cinema. For me, actually, the first thing is actually to acknowledge that when people get together in a room and discuss a certain case that really concerns them in a personal, intimate, but also political sense, in the sense that it's collective and concerns the entire society, even without a lens or a screen, it's a cinema for me. And then the second is that when we do want to make a lens and a screen in there and really make a film, yeah, it's very important that we understand that to visualize something cannot be done straightforward, because then we create maybe hyper-visibility and then it creates also problems and risks for people. So we need to really create imagination. Imagination and the poetry of the film is very much heart of the what political cinema has to be today, because we have to. I also really want this film. This film is so much about human vulnerability, and that this is actually what resists kind of like political thinking in the strict sense, and also institutional thinking. And it's this what actually opposes it for me.
Right, right. Thank you so much, and all the best for your film.
Thank you for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
GT Holidays, South India's #1 travel brand, presents Galata Plus at the Berlin Film Festival 2024.
GT Holidays, South India's #1 travel brand.